Sadly, anybody who's been paying attention to COP26, the climate summit going on in Glasgow at the moment, may have been aware that it's starting to look a little bit cultish. As far as I can tell, I'll get into the details of why I have come to this conclusion. It seems to me that there is being a concerted effort to try to interconnect climate change, many of you may have seen this as well, with basically every other potential hardship people might experience throughout the world, and they are trying, in essence, to create a climate intersectionality. They're trying to wrap climate into the progressive stack. For instance, how you would quantify, oppression due to climate, I don't know, but they're going to try and do it anyway. So we've had earlier on this month, last month, and basically through the second half of this year, organizations like Insulate Britain and Extinction Rebellion causing trouble, holding protests. I mean, the Extinction Rebellion protest that was held in London earlier this year just looked like a gigantic rave to me, but I'm sure they thought they were doing something useful.
Well, I'm sure they thought that.
Yes, but it all seems to have been a push to agitate for specific goals that they wanted to push world leaders to strive for. COP26 ends this Friday, so at the moment there is a final push being made by world leaders to try to attain those goals. And just to make sure, we're not really going to talk about whether or not our opinions on climate change or anything like that. I'll leave that to the scientists. They know a lot about that, more about that than I do. So please, YouTube, don't hurt me. So let's just first take a look at what is actually going on at COP26. So this is CNBC's coverage of it. So they say here, just as a quick update of what's been going on, the UN's climate agency has published the first draft of the political decision countries will issue at the end of the COP26 summit. Negotiators from nearly 200 countries will work from the draft known as the cover decision to strike a final deal before the summit ends on Friday. The 7-page draft agreement focuses on adaptation, helping countries deal with the effects of climate change, and finance, a controversial issue because poorer countries accuse richer countries of not contributing enough to help them tackle climate change. Why that's our problem, I don't know. The draft decision calls on countries to revisit and strengthen the 2030 targets in their nationally determined contributions as necessary to align with the Paris Agreement temperature goal by the end of 2022. It also emphasized the importance of multilateralism and the crucial role of internal cooperation in tackling climate change, and includes sections addressing science, adaptation, mitigation, and finance and technology, among others.
Yeah, there are many things to pull up here, aren't there?
Yeah, there's a lot to go over, but I don't claim to be an expert in any of these subjects. So
the one thing I would interject, or would like to interject about, is quite how much impoverished nations are apparently asking for help.
Yeah. I mean, there are all these big questions. I mean, that is something that I will get into in a moment in terms of how certain groups from certain cultures are trying to put the onus on, larger countries more wealthy countries like us and the US to do something, do anything. It says here, the draft agreement also calls for countries to accelerate the phase-out of coal and subsidies of fossil fuels. It is thought to be the first time that fossil fuels have been targeted in this way, although it does include specific does not... don't know if this is misprint. It does include specific targets or end dates. I don't know if they meant to put it does not include specific targets or end dates. The landmark Paris Agreement does not mention fossil fuels. Well, the thing is here, I don't know if they've been, had these people involved in this have their finger on the cultural pulse. But for me, for the past decade and a half, ever since I was really in education or started to pay attention in education, they've been banging on about fossil fuels and trying to phase them out. So I don't know where this is coming from. I mean, this whole thing, as with many things, seems like a glorified backpassing
This is something
contest.
you'd expect to have been published, 20, maybe 30 years ago, not in 2021.
Once again, not making any critical comments on climate change itself. I just more want to point out the absurd behavior of a lot of the people involved in this summit and outside of the summit. We also had, speaking of absurd behavior, we had Greta Thunberg showing up to lead thousands at Youth Climate March in Glasgow. So she branded the COP26 a failure, saying that the people in power need to wake up. Now, I've seen a few people covering her outside of the climate summit, and it's basically just her making the same kinds of speeches that you expect. Not enough's being done. They're ignoring our voices. We need to speak up. The youth of today must make our voices heard. All that sort of stuff.
Oh, and screw the British now as well.
Oh, almost certainly. I didn't necessarily hear that specifically, but I imagine there were a few of those sentiments being bandied about.
About the Industrial Revolution specifically, but that's inseparable from...
But I mean, the whole point is that even when the whole plan from politicians, when you actually see about what they're talking about, seems to be a complete restructuring of society as we know it in terms of how things are organized financially and technologically, Greta Thunberg and her folks don't think that's enough. We don't just need to restructure society. I'm sure she would probably argue against my characterization of this, but she seems to be one of the doomsayers who says we need to tear society down, as far as I can tell. It says here the climate activist was speaking after she walked with thousands of people, including many children, got to get the children first, get them quick, on a protest march in Glasgow. Organised by the school strike movement Fridays for Future, the demonstration moved from Kelvin Grove Park through to George Square and was the biggest protest seen so far during the COP26 climate summit taking place in the city. So she found a very clever way of getting all of these kids their Fridays off school. Excellent job, Greta. Very well done, making a big difference here.
Which is going to be very popular among some for all the wrong reasons from this.
And that's some of the stuff that's going on outside, but it doesn't really compare to some of the absurdities that are going on inside the summit. And I think to really demonstrate this, it needs to be seen to be believed. So, John, if you could play the clip so we can get a nice big full screen image of it. So for those of you listening rather than watching, we can currently see there is a gigantic Wicker Man voodoo doll on the stage at the climate conference, who is supposedly a representation of a 10-year-old Syrian refugee called Amal.
With little Amal today.
How is this not nightmare fuel?
Before we share with you all today, we'd like to share something with each other. I brought Amal a say, which is a flower like the one I have in my ear, to represent hope and light, and it is my pleasure to gift it to her.
Oh my word.
Yeah,
you know what would have made this better if I could say one thing, is if you had Radiohead's Burn the Witch playing in the background.
A little bit, I can see that. And what they've done is the woman, who is a Samoan woman speaking, gave a flower to this gigantic, creepy Chucky doll, basically. That just looks so cultish to me. That looks like they've even got a person inside. Are they about to, at the end of on Friday, when COP finishes, will they burn this monstrosity with him inside of it while doing some kind of pagan dance? That's my question. I mean, it just seems so absurd. You've seen The Wicker Man, right? The 70s classic?
Yes.
Yeah, and sorry to spoil this for anybody who hasn't seen that version. Don't watch the Nicolas Cage version. At the end, they burn the giant Wicker Man, as you'd expect, and they all do a creepy little dance with massive smiles on their face, and Christopher Lee's singing a cheery song. And it just reminds me of that. It just seems so creepy and weird. How do you not see that is making you look crazy?
Is perhaps this an expression of the utopian future that they envisage, as a return to paganism?
I mean, potentially. And you may wonder to yourself as well after seeing that. So that was Little Amal, is what they call it. What is Little Amal? So I found it here. So Little Amal is a 3.5 meter tall puppet of a 10-year-old Syrian refugee who was visiting COP26 in Glasgow from November 9th to 11th. So she's there for another day. Following her completion of The Walk, a 4-month-long travelling festival of art and hope over 8,000 kilometres from the Syrian border to Manchester. So it's a big thing about supporting refugees, which is where you start to see all of this start to wrap into the intersectional mindset, where it's a big refugee push. I mean, why they think a gigantic, creepy voodoo doll will help with their optics, I don't know, especially given that, I mean, most people I'm sure wouldn't have as much of a problem with mass immigration and taking in refugees if it was abused 10-year-old girls and boys coming into the country. But from what me and Carl covered yesterday, you can see on the Belarus-Polish border,
Yeah.
it's mainly adult men, working age strong adult men coming over, claiming to be refugees. So
if little Amal actually made an appearance at the border, she'd probably be one of the only females there.
probably, I mean, not barring the man were operating inside
of course,
of her.
yes.
But yeah, every other photograph that we've always seen en masse of people immigrating en masse is primarily working age men. So the message doesn't really hit that hard for me.
No.
Shockingly enough. John has made a joke that I feel like YouTube may not enjoy, so I'll skip past that. So you can see, once again, there's the joining together of the mindset of refugees, and for some reason, this gigantic refugee doll is making an appearance at a climate conference. I mean, if she's supposed to be Syrian, I'm pretty sure the Syrian refugees are fleeing a civil war, not just a particularly hot summer. So I find it very confusing. But then let's take a look at what else they're trying to connect with climate change. So if you skip along, John, we can see this here. I'm not going to play the clip because it's Nancy Pelosi. I don't need that right now. But she's talking about how Build Back Better and bipartisan infrastructure framework recognizes the interconnectedness of climate change and gender justice. Our legislation advances our mission to decarbonize and realign every sector of the economy. And what that leaves out is that immediately after she says that it's all in the name of achieving net zero globally. And she also says it is a model of collaboration that brings together public, private, and non-profit sectors. Now, think back to a time in the 1930s, even before that, where there were people saying that one of the primary facets of a particular ideology was the joining of the public, corporate, and global government kind of establishments together. And it starts to sound a little bit sinister.
You know what it sounds like? Fritz Lang's Metropolis.
A little bit. I mean, to me, it just sounds like fascism, personally, in a more classical sense.
Essentially, it is.
Because, of course, all of this will be controlled under the guiding hand of Big Daddy government, their creepy Uncle Joe's government.
Oh, God.
Yeah, to make everything okay for you. And then that's how Pelosi and others are sort of approaching this from. They're wrapping it into gender justice for some reason. How the climate is affecting women's issues or transgender issues, I have no idea. They just throw these things out to wrap them all together so that most people will understand this is a bad thing. And then I have recently been scrolling through some Instagram stories from people within the media. And one of the people I follow on Instagram has been attending COP26, and on his story I saw this, John, if you could pull up the image. I took a screenshot of this just because of how ridiculous it was. Are you able to get that up, John? Here we go, yeah. So this is from Glasgow, and you can see here it's a group of people. For anybody not watching, it seems to be an image of a group of people standing around, presumably by a river. And the caption that has been written here is quite beautiful. I met an indigenous tribe from Canada on the train in, and talking to them was possibly the most eye-opening experience. They kindly invited me to their water ceremony they performed. These tribes protect 80% of the world's biodiversity. I'm gonna need a fact check on that one if we could. It seems very just assertive rather than providing any evidence to back it up.
Yeah. I'd like to know the nature of this water ceremony that they're talking about as well, because that would affect the claim about biodiversity.
Yeah, I mean, what a water ceremony will do to help the environment, I don't know. It sounds like voodoo magic to me. But it continues. Yet they are rarely given a voice on climate issues, as companies funded by world banks and governments murder these people, destroy their land. As they said, imagine how it would feel to have someone burn your house and steal your possessions. Change starts with education and action. It's time we all did more. Just absolute ridiculous post-colonial nonsense right there. The governments are not murdering these people. They are not destroying their land. And if you want to talk about people being indigenous, these people have come all the way from Canada to come into Scotland, a land that has indigenous people within it, otherwise known as the Scottish, to tell them how they should restructure their society. And you're complaining about you not being given a voice on climate issues. As much as I complain that all this COP stuff just seems to be a load of the world leaders patting themselves on the back and telling them, wow, job well done. Your guys' solution is to do a water ceremony. I mean, what do you expect? I mean, good God. But yeah, so this is obviously, once again, wrapping in the ideas of post-colonialism, intersectionality, gender troubles, and all that sort of stuff into the climate narrative, which is making it, to me, and many others, I'd imagine, seem more and more and more like a cult.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's about all I had to say on that. No comment specifically on climate change, just that the people at these events, and especially surrounding these events, seem mental to me.
Just a little bit. And they don't seem to be very well attuned to the virtues that they want to be espousing, just given how contradictory the things that they're advocating are.
Yeah.
But I do have to run one question past you in general, and it is a big one, but I think it's at the back of a lot of people's minds at the moment. Putin didn't attend COP26. China, well, I think President Xi sent someone to COP26.
I'm not aware if President Xi sent someone. In fact, I was under the impression that he had not sent anyone and that China was not attending.
Yeah, well, he hasn't been outside of China since coronavirus.
That's unsurprising.
But do you not think that, given that, well, I suppose China are probably, if we're serious about dealing with the climate issue, China,
they do produce 27% of global carbon emissions, meaning that they do almost double the next biggest emitter, which is the US, who produce 15%. The UK and other such countries produce 1%. Yeah. So how much can we do to combat?
We need them at the table. In short, if we're serious, given their abstinence, do you think this could be the beginning of the end of COP altogether? Or at the very least, its conversion into what is just an unashamed act of intellectual posturing, really, or mixed in with weird fetishes about wicker dolls.
I mean, just on the basis of the fact, as you say, it's sort of there's a sense of intellectual fetishism going on of all these people showing up. I'm pretty sure Attenborough and other people are there showing up to go, oh, look how much we care, look how smart we are, we care about problems in the world. I don't think it's going to end. I mean, for anybody paying attention, it should look ridiculous. But for all of those actively involved in it, they're going to keep doing this sort of stuff. So whether or not they actively involve the sort of people who make the most contribution to the problem that they're trying to fight.
Bohemian Grove Reborn, maybe?
Maybe.
Thanks for watching this clip from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters. We broadcast live on lotuseaters.com at 1 PM UK time every weekday. And we also have loads more content that we don't put on YouTube, such as the memes and video comments from our community. Every week we also have new episodes of our regular series, Contemplations and Epochs. In Contemplations, Josh explores interesting and diverse topics, such as the science behind the need for fathers in the home, or why people believe in ghosts and the paranormal. In Epochs, Bo and I go on, often at length, about various events and periods in history that are particularly fascinating. We've just finished a 5-part mini-series on the 100 Years' War, which I particularly enjoyed right up until the end of it when, spoiler alert, the French won. Alongside our excellent team of in-house writers, we also commission articles from outside contributors, and silver and gold tier subscribers have access to an audio recording of each premium article, so you don't have to read it yourself. We interview various contemporary thinkers and entertainers, as well as host the recordings of our live events. We also have a series of premium video content on the site, which we think is particularly worthwhile, or we simply can't put on YouTube because their editorial policies prohibit reasonable discussion on the subject. Personally, I think the deep dives we've been doing into critical theory and critical race theory are most important, as we reveal the origins of intersectionality and the plan that the radical left has for our societies. We are funded almost exclusively by our subscribers, so if you'd like to join us in the work we're doing, head over to lotuseaters.com and we'll see you there.